Iconic. It's a word marketing people just love to beat us over the head with, isn't it? But in the case of the Maruti Suzuki Swift, I think it's justified. You see, we don't have too many truly iconic cars in the Indian car market, but the Swift is certainly one of them. And that, it doesn't have anything to do with its price, with its spec sheet, or even its sales, which are, by the way, incredible. It's regularly in the top 5 selling cars in India, and at the moment, it's on the verge of 3 million units. In fact, by the time you watch this, it'll probably have crossed that. But no, to be iconic is something far more emotional. It's about the look, it's about the feel, it's about aspirational value, and it's about winning the hearts of the people. And when you think about it, Maruti Suzuki, a brand that's generally all about numbers, that's quite a tall order, and it has big shoes to fill. Well, here we are, Generation 4 Swift. I'm Gavin D'Souza, and have they done it? Over the course of this video, we'll try and answer that question. Is it nicer on the inside? Have they modernized it enough? And does it still drive like a dream? But first, and maybe most important of all, does it look like a Swift? To be iconic is to be instantly recognizable, and I think they've succeeded in this regard. But what do you think? Let us know down in the comments. Do you like the look of the new Swift? If you do, give this video a thumbs up, and I hope you're subscribed to Autocar India and have clicked that bell icon to stay notified. But yeah, one look at this and you know it's the brand new Swift. Now it's of course entirely new, but they've done that familiarity by keeping the shape more or less the same as it's always been. That means narrow at the top, slightly wide and rounded at the bottom. The contrast roof sure helps, but even without it, you know this is a Swift at the very first glance. But yep, everything is brand new, and it starts with that new grille that's gloss black on top variants, and these headlamps that come upwards like this and have an L-shaped DRL pattern. Dare I say it looks a little bit Maserati, but hey, if you're going to draw inspiration, you might as well do it from the best. I think it comes together really well. The Suzuki logo has moved up from the grille to the bonnet, and speaking of the bonnet, it's this new clamshell arrangement which on its own is really quite interesting. It's just that the execution in places is quite distracting. Like, it creates a bit of a gap here above the headlamp and you will constantly be looking at that. But overall, I think it works well with the Swift design. That's what it's like from the front. Let's go look at the side and the back. Now at the side, again, the profile is quite recognizable, and that's what makes it a Swift. It's the roofline that tapers slightly towards the end that really gives the game away. Now, one thing that's changed from the last generation Swift is that the rear door handle used to be up here in the C-pillar, and now it's down here on the door in a conventional position. Another superb detail, I think, is this thick, very prominent line that runs the length of the car from that clamshell bonnet all the way to the tail lamp, and these pronounced flanks, both at the front and the rear, with a little bit of a crease of their own. It just gives a lot of muscularity to the Swift and sets it apart from your average family hatchback. I do wish though they've gone for a larger size of wheel, maybe 16-inch. It's stuck with 15-inch wheels, and though they look quite nice, just a little bit meek for the sporty hatchback model, don't you think? The rear, in my opinion, is the least interesting angle of the new Swift. Yes, it is instantly recognizable once again, but it's not particularly unique like the rest of the car is. These tail lamps, for example, they're a squarish shape and they have this interesting LED light pattern on the inside, which I quite like, but the rest of it is very much halogen. Now at the back here, you do get the Suzuki logo, the rear camera, the Swift logo, a rear washer and wiper, and this rather standard looking antenna, not a shark fin one. Some people might have preferred that. Now, if you open the boot, it's about 265 liters, which is a good size for a hatchback, and the space is quite usable. Yes, there's a bit of a lip to load stuff over, but it's not as bad as, say, some compact SUVs. So I think you'll be okay for a weekend trip in the new Swift. All things considered then, I think the exterior of the new Swift is a job well done by Maruti. But can we say the same about the inside? When it comes to the new Swift's interior, I have mixed feelings, but let's start with the stuff that I really like. For one, it feels very much a Swift driving position. The seating position is just right. You get these upright, slightly upright A-pillars that are characteristic of a Swift, and you get big glass areas, at least for the front half of the cabin. I also like the steering wheel. Yes, it's quite familiar, but it works well. It's got all the controls you need. I like that they've changed it to gloss black from the old silver. It looks a bit more upmarket and suits the Swift really well. I like those dials. Yes, they're traditional analog, they're not digital, but I think that's okay in this segment. Plus they're really clear and easy to read with big fonts and a nice color MID. I really like those needles. They're very sporty looking, and it all comes in this very cool sporty binnacle. What else? I like that there's been an improvement in plastic quality and fit and finish overall compared to the last Swift. There's a bit of grain and texture to the plastics, and there's also some relief in the form of this silver finish here, the gloss black for the AC controls. Speaking of which, the AC controls, I think they work really well. Yes, they are from the Baleno and the Bronx, but using these toggles is easy on the move, and these physical buttons down here. I also like that this wireless charger can hold a very large smartphone, and there's a nice lip to prevent it from sliding around. And these seats, they're comfy, they're sporty, they're familiar, but they're nice and snug and suit the car's character really well. I also like those speaker grills. It's an interesting touch. They look like they've been maybe borrowed from an Audi, but the way they're executed is quite upmarket. And now onto the stuff I'm not such a big fan of. Yes, plastic quality and fit and finish have improved, but it's just all so dull and grey. This could have been a great opportunity to liven things up with a bit more color, but it's just not. This texture here, well finished, but it just could have been nice. These AC vents, also very nice, but you might miss them because they just blend into the background. Even over here, a little bit more soft touch material would not have gone amiss. It's all hard plastic apart from this elbow pad over here. And of course, the classic Swift window switches are back. They will never get rid of those. Storage in this cabin is not great either. You get a pretty small glove box, only average size door pockets. These cup holders can take small bottles and maybe a little bit more than this, but they're not huge. And down here you only get tiny cubby holes. There's no armrest or box to keep stuff in. And finally, this touchscreen. I really like the touchscreen. It's a 9-inch unit, and Maruti's Smart Play Pro interface is really nice. It gives you lots of information. It's quite slick. But I don't like the fact that it's propped so high up on the dashboard and has such a huge housing. There's 3 inches on either side of it of just thick black plastic that doesn't serve any function. And though you can see the road just fine, it's a constant distraction that's in your line of sight. I wish they had placed it a little bit lower. But that said, they have added quite a few features to the new Swift, so let's go take a look at them right now. In top spec ZXi Plus, guys, the Swift is well equipped with the likes of automatic LED headlamps, a wireless phone charger, auto climate control, a rear view camera and cruise control. The aforementioned 9-inch touchscreen meanwhile is slick to use and includes wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, connected car tech and even some voice commands. Clearly then the front seat occupants are well catered to, but what about those in the back? The backseat proposition hasn't changed too much from the previous Swift. It's got about the same amount of space as before, and that's to say it's pretty good. I'm just under 5'8", that's set to my position. I've got plenty of knee room and quite a bit of headroom too. Of course, if you have a larger driver and a larger passenger behind, that could change a little bit. There's loads of space for your feet under the front seat, though thigh support on this rather flat bench is not all that great. I'm pretty impressed with the view out this window, and this rear quarter glass does make quite a difference. It does give you that slight sense of greater airiness compared to the previous Swift, where there was just a door handle in that space over there. Now interestingly, there's no rear armrest back here, and that means no chance of rear cup holders either. In fact, the doors just get one slim bottle holder each. There's no center headrest, but there is a 3-point seat belt for the center passenger. There are now AC vents, which is a nice addition to the Swift, a USB-A and a USB-C port. And while there is a pocket in the back of this seat, there's no pocket on the back of this one for some reason. So things are still very much geared to the driver in the Swift. But now we have to talk safety, and as I mentioned, the Swift now gets 3-point seat belts for all seats as standard. Also standard are 6 airbags, ESC and hill hold assist, which should help with a crash test rating, should it be submitted for one. Incidentally, the new Swift scored 4 stars at a 90% rating in the Japan NCAP test. But it's also worth remembering that the previous India spec Swift, which uses the same hardtech platform as the new one, scored just 1 star under the new global NCAP protocols in 2022. We'll just have to wait and see. And with that, let's hit the road because we too want to see what all the fuss is about under the hood. It's good to be back at the wheel of a Swift again, a brand new Swift, but one that gives you a very familiar feel from the driver's seat. Of course, there's one fundamental change right away, and that's the engine. It's called the Z12E, and while it still displaces 1.2 liters, it's down from 4 cylinders to 3. It's a big change and a big departure from the petrol engines of the Swift of the past, because they've always been 4-cylinder ones, right from the G13B, which started it out, the 1.3, to the various K12 1.2 liter engines. And here we are in the Z series with a 3-cylinder. The headline figures are ARAI fuel economy ratings of 25.75 kpl for the AMT and 24.80 kpl for the manual. What definitely helped was the engine auto stop-start function, but it has to be noted that this is not Maruti's SHVS mild hybrid system. However, what's really got the comment sections up in arms is that with 82 horsepower and 112 Newton meters, it's less powerful than the previous engine. And right away, let me put you at ease because it is a very, very good engine. First common issue with 3-cylinder engines, refinement, it's very good. Yeah, you can hear a little bit of rumble and clatter when you're standing outside the car, but when you're sat inside, it's really not that bad. It won't be quite as smooth as the 4-cylinder K12 engines, and yes, you'll feel a little bit of rumble through the pedal as you go up, but again, I'm nitpicking here. On its own, in isolation, it is actually very, very good. As an advantage, what it brings is some much needed low end torque. Now the reason I say much needed is because as a city car, you need that to get going in stop and go traffic. Yes, the Swift is meant to be the fun to drive one, but you won't always be revving to the red line. Speaking of the red line, that is now down to 6,000 RPM. So it's a little bit lower. And yes, before you even get to 6,000, you'll feel a drop off in power somewhere around 5.5. So yes, assuming you are chasing those revs all the way to the red line, you will feel a little disappointed as you get towards the end. It's a different character, not what we remember from Swifts of old, but it's not a bad thing in any way. Now you'll notice I'm not shifting gears, that's because I'm driving the AMT version. It has to be said, Maruti's AMTs have come a very long way and now are amongst the best. They've gotten a whole lot smoother, more intuitive, and once you're driving at a relaxed pace, you really don't notice it's there. The thing is, an AMT is an AMT, and it's always gonna give you that head nod the moment you start picking up the pace. If you want to drive quickly, and you might want to do that in a car like the Swift, you do have to contend with that lag, that little gap, that head nod that comes between gears. And the harder you push, the more prominent it is. I suppose it's good that there is a manual mode for when you want to drive fast, and when you don't want to drive fast, the automatic mode is possible, but I can't help but feel that this would have been a great opportunity to introduce a better gearbox for the Swift. A new engine coming in, perhaps they could have brought in a new gearbox too, maybe a CVT if not a torque converter. And I know they had it in the last generation as well, but the AMT is just not in keeping with the sporty and premium nature of the Swift. Now they say they've made some changes to the rear suspension. They've stiffened it up in the interest of better handling. And I think that works. I'm on a highway right now, but a little while ago I was on a slightly winding road and the body control is just very, very good in this car. The old one, the 3rd generation Swift, got a little bit roly-poly, but they've tied it down nicely with this 4th generation. Has it compromised the ride quality? Not too badly, but rear seat passengers might feel bumps and potholes a little bit more than in the previous car. Overall, however, it's an improvement, riding with greater maturity, helped also by a revised front stabilizer bar. What has also seen a marked improvement is the steering. Gone are the days when Swift steerings would not return to center, where they were overly light. That in-between phase, somewhere between generation 2 and a lot of generation 3, it's all been corrected now. I'm happy to report. There's a lot more weight in the steering. It gives you a lot more confidence out on the highway and through the corners. and it's getting back slowly to that original Swift feel. It's not there yet, but it's a step in the right direction. That is a huge revelation. The Swift is correcting course to return to its dynamic heyday. The engine is surprisingly good too, but to experience it at its best, you simply cannot have the AMT. Now that is more like it. A manual is the gearbox this new engine deserves, and indeed what a Swift deserves. Now that I have better control over the revs, I can tell you that yes, if you keep it in a certain zone close to the 4000 RPM mark, you do get a lot of that 3-cylinder grumble. But I also have to say that it's not a terrible sounding noise. In fact, it reminds me a lot of Ford's Dragon series engines, the 1.2 and the 1.5, both 3 cylinders, which are some of the best 3-cylinder engines out there. Also very apparent is the new hydraulically actuated clutch. It's no longer cable operated, and you can tell that in the sort of heft with which it moves. It's very smooth and not snappy like the one before. That said, I do feel the clutch pedal travel is a little on the long side, slightly detracting from that quick shifting driving pleasure, but really I'm nitpicking at this point. It's a very good transmission. The gear shifts as ever are nice and light and slick and slot into place with that satisfying click. And here with the manual you can really get the most out of this new engine. You know when to keep it at the low revs, like when you're moving around town and you just want that nice low end torque. And when you're cruising out of the highway like I am now, you can move it up into the mid-range, which is just above 3000 RPM. Priced between 6.49 lakh to 9.5 lakh rupees ex-showroom, the Swift has predictably moved up in price with the new generation, making it more expensive than a Grand i10 Neos and putting it awfully close to its big brother, the Baleno. The good news is that the Swift makes more of an effort to set itself apart this time, thanks to its new Z12E engine, although let's face it, this will find its way into other Maruti small cars in due time. But it's also thanks to its return to fun-to-drive dynamics and a more modern take on the classic Swift design that'll make you love this hatchback as much as you did its predecessors. Iconic? You bet.